Good evening and welcome to the Virtual Family Council. My name is Jamie Rose. I'm the Virtual Family Council Coordinator. And we're going to kick off the meeting with reviewing our confidentiality reminder. So please refrain from using the name of your loved one. Do not name specific facilities. Please use a nursing home or the personal care home to present to the group. If you need specific assistance, please use the chat feature to state which county you are in, and we'll get you connected to your assigned ombudsman. And a reminder, these calls have public access and are designed for family members and friends of residents in long-term care facilities. We'll review our meeting agenda. We're going to get our virtual meeting tips from Eliza, and then we're going to have a legislation update from Jeannie Urban. And then we're going to turn it over for our presentation on protective services. And then we'll follow up with our upcoming meeting topics. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Eliza for our virtual meeting tips.
Good evening, everybody. You all have been placed in mute upon entry to reduce the background noise this evening. So we will open the lines at the end of the presentation tonight. If you would like to speak or if you have a question, please use the raise hand feature. Once your hand is raised, we will acknowledge you and unmute your line. If you hover your mouse near the bottom of your screen, you'll see the participants tab. You can expand that tab if you would like to see who all is in the call this evening. The chat feature is at the bottom of your screen as well. You can maximize that, and then you'll be able to chat with the chat moderator if you have any questions or comments. Closed captioning is available during the call this evening. If you hit the CC button at the bottom of your screen, you will be able to enable the closed captioning. If you need to step away, you can stop sharing your camera by clicking on the camera icon at the bottom of the screen. You can click on it again to start sharing your camera then. Any concerns or comments can be directed to the State Ombudsman Office at 717-783-8975, or you can email us at ltcombudsman@pa.gov. And it is with great pleasure that I now introduce Jeannie Urban. Take it away, Jeannie.
Not sure if Jeannie can actually hear us or not.
Jamie, can you hear me? Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I beg your pardon. I lost my audio. I couldn't hear any of you, so I don't know what was going on. I'm on the phone and I apologize. I am Jeannie Urban, and you see the update on your screen for the legislative update of the Pennsylvania House Bill 649, which is Access to Congregate Care Facilities Act. It was originally introduced in March. Hi, can you hear me?
It can hear
I
you now, Jeannie.
apologize. I don't know what's going on because it just keeps telling me that I'm muted and I'm not doing anything with the phone. So anyway, the bill was initially introduced in the House on March the 15th to the Health Committee. It has gone through, it rapidly went through several committees until the end of March. Then it was re-referred back to the Appropriations Committee on June the 9th. and it is in committee as of today. The committee meetings were scheduled today, the 15th, and tomorrow, the 16th, but the time and the agenda were not announced, so I was unable to provide you with that information. The committee chair is Representative Stan Saylor, a Republican from York County. He represents the 94th Legislative District. His phone numbers are on the screen. I have also prepared a summary sheet that will give you information on the legislation and some links that you can use to pick up the information about the different committee members. The minority representative is Matthew Bradford, and he's a Democrat from Montgomery County in the 70th Legislative District. His numbers are also up there. I'm not sure. I think we should proceed to put some pressure on our legislators because the fact that this bill languished in committee for 3 months distresses me very much. That was before anything was done with it. So please check your email tomorrow and contact your legislators if you have interest in seeing this congregate care facilities. And that does include our long-term skilled facilities and assisted living facilities. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to tonight's speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Denise Getgen, who is the Protective Services Director for the Pennsylvania Department of Aging. During her time in service with the department, Denise has, quote, worked to raise awareness about elder abuse while proactively and effectively working with stakeholders throughout the Commonwealth to ensure that older Pennsylvanians have access to a protective services system that ensures their rights and paves a pathway to elder justice, according to former Secretary of Aging, Teresa Osborne. On May the 22nd of 2017, Denise earned the Governor's Award for Excellence for her efforts to coordinate and collaborate with programs across state agencies to prevent elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation and assist the victims. The award recognizes Commonwealth employees for exemplary job performance or service that reflects initiative, leadership, innovation, and increased efficiency. Among her accomplishments, Denise has partnered with the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities to combat elder financial exploitation by educating frontline professionals in the banking industry about frauds and scams that target Pennsylvania's seniors. She increased awareness, improved responsiveness, and protected resources for the state. In addition to directing older adult protective services, or OPSA, for individuals over the age of 60, Getchen has collaborated with the Department of Human Services to implement and grow Pennsylvania's Adult Protective Services, or APSA, system to ensure that vulnerable adults between the ages of 18 and 59 also have access to a protective services program that reduces risks, arranges for services and supports, and enables vulnerable adults to live independently and safely in their homes and communities. Denise earned her BS in nursing at Lycoming College and her RN at the Pennsylvania College of Technology. She is a lifelong resident of the Berwick area, and it is my pleasure to give you Denise Getgen.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And I want to thank all of you for inviting me to be here with all of you on today, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So I can't thank you enough for this opportunity to just be here and talk with all of you. I'd like to provide you all with an overview of the Older Adults Protective Service Act, again, commonly referred to as OPSA, so the Older Adults Protective Service Act. So this law, we are very lucky in Pennsylvania. We do have protections throughout the lifespan. So many of you know we have Child Protective Services, and now since approximately 2010, we have Adult Protective Services for individuals 18 to 59 living with disabilities. And then we have what we do at the Department of Aging, which is Older Adult Protective Services. So I wanted to share some information with you, all of you, about that law, as it certainly impacts you on a day-to-day basis. So a little bit about the law. The law passed in the late 80s, and it's been amended twice since that time. We're going to talk about those amendments in just a minute. When I look at this law, I really think of it in three parts. So the first part is voluntary reporting and just generally protective services. So basically what that part says is that any person who has reasonable cause to believe that an older adult is a victim of elder abuse can report that to the local area agency on aging. In this part of the law, the reporters can be anonymous, which is fantastic because that certainly opens the door for people who might be fearful of people trying to get back at them, or if they're wrong, they're very worried about that. So it really opens the door for people to be anonymous, yet still report. The other part of this law in this piece talk just about protective services, and it really just indicates that there'll be a system in place at the local area agencies on aging to take those allegations of abuse, document them, and investigate them, and then put in services if services are necessary. So I'll talk about that in just a few minutes as well. So that's the first part of the law. The second part, the amendment, they added criminal history background checks for individuals who are working in long-term care facilities. Basically, what this part says is that everyone who wants to work in long-term care facilities needs a Pennsylvania State Police check. And then there are some who get both the Pennsylvania State Police check and an FBI check. So those people are people who have been outside of the state 2 years preceding their application. So everyone gets the PSP check, and then some get both the PSP check and the FBI check. We do that FBI part in our office. This part of the law has been deemed unconstitutional twice, really centered around holding people accountable who have criminal histories. So individuals who have been arrested and convicted of certain crimes, they've already been held accountable, and that what the courts have said is that we cannot bar their employment for a lifetime since they've already paid that debt to society. So both in 2003 and 2015, the Pennsylvania courts basically said, hey, look, these people have served their time. You cannot have a long list of offenses that are lifetime bans. So right now, what that means is that we're still getting background checks and FBI checks, but facilities are making all employment decisions in terms of who they hire right now. So that is totally up to them. The third part of the law, again, the Second Amendment, was mandatory abuse reporting. And what this section says is that employees or administrators of long-term care facilities must immediately report all suspected abuse to the local area agency on aging. If that suspected abuse rises to one of the 4 serious types of abuse, then they have additional reporting requirements to both law enforcement and to our office at PDA, the Department of Aging. So what are the 4 serious abuse types? They are serious bodily injury, serious physical injury, suspicious death, and sexual abuse. So all abuse allegations get reported to the Area Agency on Aging. And if it's one of those 4 serious types, the facility also has to report to law enforcement and to our office directly. Some good parts of this law is that under this law, those who report and are acting in good faith have immunity from liability. So this means if the suspected elder abuse is maybe unfounded, or someone who cooperates with protective services, they cannot be sued in a court of law. So that's a good thing. That really promotes people to not be concerned about if they report, is there going to be retaliation? Are they going to be sued? So it really just, again, opens the door for people who suspect elder abuse to be able to report. So I really wanted to talk to all of you about how protective service law and protective service interacts with long-term care facilities, including nursing homes. So when a report of need, that's what we call our intake form. So when an allegation of abuse or a report of need is received at the Area Agency on Aging regarding any resident of a long-term care facility, that report gets reported also to the Department of Health, which of course all of you likely know that that's the licensing entity for all nursing homes. It also gets reported to the local ombudsman. So not only do we get the report, but licensing and the ombudsman as well get notified that there was a concern in that facility. We do work collaboratively with licensing and the ombudsman program on cases, and we can share some information, but we can talk about that in just a little bit. We do notify licensing of all facilities that fail to report in accordance with the law. So sometimes family members, like some of you, call us and report something, but we haven't heard about that from the facility themselves, which is really a good thing. And it's wonderful to have that and this opportunity to speak with you all, because it's so important that we know about these allegations of abuse or concerns that many of you have shared with us and the facility has not. So every time that happens, we do notify their licensing entity so that they can take action if they deem necessary. So I wanted to talk a minute about how we're different than licensing. So Department of Health or Department of Public Welfare, they look at is a facility in compliance with the state and federal regulations. That's very different than what protective service is called to do. We're responsible to investigate allegations of elder abuse. We then make a determination as to if the older adult is in need of protective services or not. If the older adult is found to be in need of protective services, either at the time of the incident or at the time of our investigation, then protective service is required to work with the older adult or their family members, legal representatives, if you will, to develop and implement a protective service plan. This plan is designed to decrease or eliminate the risks identified through the investigation and to the older adult. So when we talk about a service plan, what does that really mean? In protective service, another great part of our law is that there's no sort of limits on what we can do. So services, a protective service plan could be as simple as educating family regarding how to prevent falls and injuries, putting personal care into a home to provide care to an older adult whose caregiver is suddenly no longer able to provide the care. We can offer counseling to an older adult who is victimized by a family member. We work with police to arrest and prosecute caregivers who steal money from older adults. So in essence, protective service really is designed to provide any type of services that will decrease or eliminate the risk identified to the older adult. So we've done things like board animals. So we go to a house of an older adult who may be self-neglecting, and they say, yes, I know, maybe they have a wound. Yes, I know the wound's infected. Yes, I know I should go to the hospital, but I'm not going to leave my animals here unattended. They'll be taken away. They have a lot of concern about their animals. So we've boarded animals, made sure that they had the necessary shots to go into a boarding facility, have the older adult go then feel comfortable enough to go to the ER, to the hospital to get services. And then we bring them back out, and then bring their animals home to them. So it can really be as simple as education, personal care. It could be referrals to community resources for things like food. It could be referrals to law enforcement. It really just depends on what the older adult needs to decrease or eliminate that risk. So we sit down with the older adult and say, how would you like to see this resolved? We may share some ideas that we have as to how we can resolve or stop the abuse, but it is to be least restrictive. So we certainly don't want to infringe on the rights of older adults. And of course, we allow them to have autonomy and self-determination where they're part of this care plan. We don't just go in and tell them, this is what we want to see happen. We really try to work with them to come up with a plan that they're comfortable with, to reduce or eliminate the risks or get them out of an abusive situation. So I wanted to share with you some case examples of the kinds of things that we see on a regular basis. An older adult care plan in a nursing facility calls for 2 staff members to transfer the older adult from the bed to a chair. However, that staff person chooses to transfer the older adult alone, and as a result, the older adult falls and ends up with a fractured hip. We call that caregiver neglect. That certainly meets the definition in the Older Adults Protective Service Act. Protective Service can go in, do our investigation. If we determine the case is substantiated, again, meaning the older adult needs protective services, then we can put in a service plan to make sure that doesn't reoccur, or nor does it happen to any other older adult. So many times with facilities, that could be looking at what their policy is, making sure that staff are trained, making sure that staff understand what the policy is, making sure that the facility has done their own internal investigation. So it could be, we may say, we need you to retrain all of your staff to make sure this doesn't happen again, if they have a good policy. If their policy is not so good, or there's areas where we think it can be enhanced to protect people, we can certainly encourage them to do that, make revisions to that. Another example is a nurse knows, so she is aware that she is to give the physician-ordered medication to all residents of a certain hallway. The nurse is running late, so decides not to give any of the medication. However, signs as if she did give them to the residents. The residents, however, report that they did not get their medication, and the medication count shows that the medications were not given. So we really have a falsification of documentation, and we have a neglect, again, caregiver neglect, where the nurse knows what she's to do, which is provide the medication, however, fails to do that, and certainly puts the older adults who need those physician-ordered medications at risk. So in that case, we would go in, we do an investigation. We may speak to the staff member involved. We may speak to the residents involved. We would speak to the physician about the risk placed at the risk to the older adult because the medication was not given. We would look at the facility's internal investigation. We would conduct our own investigation, interview all the people I just mentioned, and make a decision as to whether this nurse placed these people at risk and what we can do about that to make sure that doesn't happen again. So again, implement a service plan to decrease or eliminate the risk. Another example that maybe you've heard of is financial exploitation, what we like to call theft. In terms of the criminal code, in protective services, we call it financial exploitation. So an example of that might be that an older adult has a diagnosis or has a diagnosis of dementia or may have some cognitive impairment. His son comes into the facility and tells his father to sign papers that he brought in with him. The paperwork transfers the older adult's home and land to the son for $1, despite the home and the land being worth $125,000. So we have a son acting not in the best interest of his father and asking him to sign papers that he may or may not understand the ramifications of that, and certainly not paying fair market value to the older adult. Unfortunately, we see this all the time. We have a real growing problem in Pennsylvania with financial exploitation. At a few years back, the governor charged our department with doing a financial exploitation study. And of course, the findings were really significant losses to older adults, over $56 million a year could be lost to Pennsylvania's older adults because of financial exploitation. So we're really seeing a lot of asset transfers. We're seeing a lot of cash removed from older adults' bank accounts. We're seeing loans being taken out in the older adult's name when they have not consented to that. So a lot of things going on, and we just have to be very careful around financial exploitation because, of course, older adults don't have the time to recoup that money in many cases. Another example is a resident's son is her power of attorney. He is responsible to pay all of her bills at the nursing home. The son stops paying his mother's bills at the nursing home because he is spending all of her money on his gambling addiction. So again, it's a financial exploitation. He has the responsibility because he is the power of attorney to pay her bills. However, he has a gambling problem and is using her money to gamble instead of paying her nursing home bill. And of course, that can result in a non-payment and possible discharge from the facility. When protective service gets involved in those kinds of cases, we certainly try to protect the older adult and keep them at the facility if that's at all possible, which many times it is. But we certainly would bring those kinds of cases to the attention of law enforcement and work with a sister agency, Department of Human Services, to see if we could get them possibly on medical assistance due to this theft of their assets. So I wanted to just share with you some of the kinds of cases. I've been doing this work for about 14 years. And in that time, we've seen an increase of, let's see, when I started about 14 years ago, we had about 8,000 allegations of elder abuse annually. Now this year, we were over 50,000 allegations coming into our office. That's for both adults and older adults. We've seen approximately an 80% increase in older adult reports in the last 5 years. And that includes this year with COVID and last year, where we saw a pretty significant decrease for a period of time. But still, overall, we see an 80% increase. And you just don't see that in other abuse types. We don't see those kinds of increases in child abuse or animal abuse, but we are definitely seeing it over all of the years that I've been doing this work. Every single year, we see an increase of approximately 11 to 26%. So we certainly have a problem with elder abuse in Pennsylvania. We're doing a lot of work around trying to get people to understand what is elder abuse. So again, I appreciate being here with all of you. We certainly need all of you to spread the word about what's happening with older adults, and to ensure that people know that there is protective services, that they can call us. We do have a 24/7 hotline that they can call anytime. Just so you know, the number is 1-800-490-8505. And again, that's 24/7, and it is answered by a live person. That person will take some basic information, and then they will transfer that call to the local area agency on aging that's closest to the older adult. so we can get there as quickly as possible. So anytime anyone suspects abuse, they should be calling the local area agency on aging. They can certainly call them directly, or they can use our hotline that I just gave to you. So with that, I'm going to stop and just see if anyone has any questions about what we do or how we do it, or any of the information that I just shared with you.
I don't see any hands at this moment, Denise.
Okay.
Denise, I don't have any questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. I just want to share with you that we really appreciate the time being with you. We appreciate that certainly all of you can share our message with other individuals who may be in need, share with residents and with even staff members. We do get a lot of staff members who call, who are concerned about things that are happening in facilities. So certainly if you would be kind enough to share our information with anyone you think might be appropriate, we certainly would appreciate that.
Denise, it appears Elaine Kelly has a question.
Okay.
Hi, my question is, I've had several incidents that have been reported, and we're still having some of the same problems with the same people. So if this has gone, I've talked to the county, I've talked to the ombudsman. If nothing changes, how do you follow up with anyone on things like that? When you can't get a phone call back, or you don't see any changes happening at the facility. I've talked to the administrator, the executive director. I finally went to corporate to get something done. So like, it sounds great, everything that you're saying, but when you report something over and over again and nothing changes, where are you supposed to go from there?
Sure. Thank you for that question. It's a good question. So let me just go back for just a moment. Part of our law, of course, wants to protect the rights of older adults at all times. So sometimes we're not able to share information, as much as information that people want or that we think would be helpful. So the law says that we can share information with providers, but we can't always share everything we know. For instance, we are not allowed to share who made a report, because of course we want to protect reporters so that they continue to report any concerns that they have. We can report in certain instances, and we can share some information. So sometimes I think that there's people who don't know what's happening because we're not allowed to tell them by law. So sometimes that can be problematic. But in this instance, I think you're saying that you aren't seeing anything change, and you're wondering, did they do all of what they could do, or what's happening behind the scenes? So I would just say that I'm getting an echo now.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm still getting that echo. I don't know if everybody maybe can go on mute. So I would just say that if you have a concern where you've reported to protective services and you tried to work with the ombudsman program and you're not getting where you feel you need to be, I mean, you certainly are able to call us at the state level to see if we could take a look into the case. And what I do typically when this happens is that I'll take a look at the case myself, or I'll ask one of my staff to take a look at the case and review it, literally word for word. And then what we can do is, although we're not allowed to share a lot of information, I think a lot of people would feel a lot better if we say to them, hey, look, I looked into this case. We've done, they did a comprehensive and thorough investigation. They did put something into place. Can't share all the details, but at least you would know that someone at the state level is looking into exactly what was done to ensure that the law was followed as it was intended. So certainly feel free to give us a call at the state level, and we'd be glad to take a look at the case, make sure that the law and the regulations were followed, that everything that could be done was done and done appropriately. Again, I know that that doesn't give a lot of people every bit of information that they would want to have, but of course, these laws were written to protect people's privacy. And I certainly, would always want to maintain that. So I am certainly willing to give anyone my direct contact. So I'm about to share with you how you could best reach me. I mean, certainly you can always call the department. You can always call my office directly. I'm at 717-772-0184. If you have that kind of concern, you can also call the hotline. And if you say, hey, I'd like to speak with Denise, or I'd like a message to be given to Denise, they certainly will forward that to me. And I can take a look into the case and get back to you.
Denise, we have a question in chat from
Okay.
Darren Prey. Does the nursing home not allowing an elder person to leave the facility considered abuse? And he goes on to say that he has talked to corporate as well, and they have not returned his call.
Okay. Thank you for your question. And I would say this, that the devil's always in the details. So there are some cases where it would be very dangerous and not the right thing to have an older adult leave the facility, especially not accompanied by anyone. Maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe the person has a medical condition that would not lend itself well to that. Maybe they have cognitive impairment. Maybe there's people in their lives who don't have the older adult's best interest at heart. So there's always those cases where it really would not be appropriate for a facility to allow an older adult to just independently leave the facility, and not have a lot of understanding about what's happening during that time. However, I would say that most older adults are certainly able and have the right to leave the facility. So again, the devil's in the details. I can't say one way or another, because it always is about what's best for that older adult. So I'd like to, if there was a case where the Area Agency on Aging, if somebody thinks that someone's rights are being infringed upon, certainly whether it's the Ombudsman program or our program, we certainly would be willing to look into that. But it really just depends on the details that surround their reasoning as to why. There's some individuals who, they have family members who cannot agree as to what's best for their mom. Maybe there's other individuals, older adults, who need a surrogate decision maker or a guardian. And in those cases, the guardian makes those kinds of decisions, whether that's appropriate or not. So we'd have to look into the details of every single case. But certainly, if you have a concern about that, please let us know about that.
Denise,
So they
Darren
should
Prey
call
has
their
his hand up.
County Area Agency on Aging. Is that correct, Denise?
That's correct. You would call your local area
Okay.
agency on aging. You would share with them that you have a concern or an allegation of abuse or caregiver neglect or whatever it is you feel is most appropriate. And then again, they would do the investigation into the concerns.
Denise, Darren Prey has his hand up.
Okay.
So the question would be, well, I guess first, you said there's a number I can contact, and the second part of it would be, they're still saying it's COVID, and actually they have restrictions on visitation as well, 4 days a week for about an hour and a half total each day.
Thank you for that detail. I think, of course, we're really in unprecedented times where we really, I think everyone on this call, everyone at facilities, I hope, has the best interests of older adults at heart. And so I know there was definitely some guidelines and some rules put into place to try to protect both staff and residents and the general public. Again, we'd have to look into the details of what's happening and why, but we'd be glad to do so. If you feel that they really are infringing upon the rights of any older adult or adult living in a facility, we certainly can take a look at that on a one by one basis to make sure that the rights of older adults are being maintained, and also that there's no abuse, neglect, exploitation, or abandonment going on.
Gerard France has a similar question, Denise, regarding the restrictions during COVID. How can you know whether a loved one is safe when visiting restrictions are in place due to COVID? You can visit in a specified area for a specific amount of time, besides an occasional Zoom meeting. That is the limit.
Thank
So
you
he's
for that.
asking for guidance.
Sure. Thank you for that
Gerard.
question, Gerard. I really appreciate that. And I certainly can understand what the concern is. I mean, I think it's human nature to want to have access to our loved ones and to make sure that they're okay when we haven't seen them in quite some time, or haven't been, able to see them regularly in person. So I certainly understand your question. I would say this: I hope that all of you who have loved ones who are residing in facilities have developed some rapport with the facility, have the ability to speak to the people who routinely care for your loved one, and to talk to them about, has there been any changes in their condition? Many facilities have policies in place and there's regulations in place where they call family members if there's been a significant change in condition. So I'm hoping that you can reach out to a facility if you have some concern. So say you're on a Zoom meeting and you notice some, what you think might be weight loss, to talk to the facility about, has their weight been, monitored lately? They look like they have lost some weight, and to try to get some further information. And I would think that that would be the best sort of response. I mean, I think till we get through this whole pandemic, all the way through, I mean, I think we're getting there, but I think until we get through, there's going to be some, what I would say is a disconnect, because you just don't see the person, as often as you'd like to, or again, in person. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to the facility to make your concerns known. If you feel that there's been a change in condition, or there's something concerning when you talk to your loved one, that you have that discussion with the facility first. If you're not, the people who day to day care for your loved one. And then if you're not getting satisfaction there, to move up to a supervisor or a director of nursing, the administrator. And if you're still not where you feel comfortable or where you feel you need to be, then I think that that's when the state level or the local area agency on aging would be appropriate. Certainly don't hesitate to call us if you feel that you're not getting the responses that you need, or you have a specific concern. For instance, maybe you have always seen your loved one in bed, or they tell you they're not getting out of bed, and you have concern about skin breakdown. I mean, that's certainly something that we can look into if there's, wounds, or someone's, not getting the care and services that they require, because again, that meets the definition of neglect. And that's one of the things we investigate. So if you have specific concerns, please reach out to us.
A question from Donna Woodward. I guess that hopefully there is no longer a great deal of physical abuse in long-term care homes. I'm concerned about neglect, which rises to the level of abuse. How can we measure/document neglect of residents' well-being to know whether this rises to the level of abuse? Especially this past year, homes have been severely short-staffed, and the level of care has decreased very much.
That's a great question. Thank you. Here's sort of what I think. And I am a nurse, so I've been a nurse for a long time. I've worked in long-term care settings. I actually worked for the Department of Health inspecting nursing homes for about 7 years before I came to the Department of Aging. So I think I have a pretty good handle on, the kinds of things that you're talking about, and neglect. So I guess if I had a loved one in a long-term care facility, I would be looking for changes in their condition. So if I talk to them on maybe a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting and they look great and they sounded great and they don't look any differently, and there's activities going on, and they can answer my basic questions about what's the care like, that kind of thing, I guess I wouldn't have as much concern. But on the flip side, if I saw changes that were not reported to me, or my loved one was telling me things that indicated neglect, things like weight loss, dehydration, pressure sores, lack of activity, lack of staff to answer call bells in a timely and reasonable manner, then I certainly would inquire more. So what we really need to get to is, how is that impacting the residents? So if we say, okay, they're short-staffed, certainly I understand that. And I don't doubt for a minute, with all we've been through and the facilities have been through with COVID, that's been going on in certain instances. So how does that impact the resident? If there's no real impact, and they're doing everything they can to meet the needs of the residents, that's something that we would not maybe report. However, if you see that there's definitely an impact on your older adults, so say they're not getting turned and repositioned, or they're not getting help being changed if their incontinence is such that they need assistance. So if you're starting to see changes in them where they're losing weight, or they don't have their assistive devices, glasses or teeth, that kind of thing, then certainly I would say to report that and let us go in and do our investigation. But again, try to have very specific information. Who is the resident you're talking about? What is your specific concern? What did you observe? Did you talk to anyone about this? Do you know what the facility's policy is? Those kinds of things can really be helpful to protective services. But I would say the other thing I just want to remind all of you, you don't have to prove a thing to call us. All you have to do is suspect elder abuse, and that's enough to call us, and we'll take care of the rest. So don't feel like you have to have absolute proof. You just need to suspect elder abuse, and that's enough under this law to call us and let us take a look into what's happening.
Thank you, Denise. A question from Billy Joe in the chat. My
Okay.
sister-in-law lives in New Jersey. Can you give me a telephone number and name for her to call? Her
Jeannie,
problem is,
Jeannie already done.
oh,
He already has it in hand.
Thank you.
alrighty, thank you.
Just so all of you know, every state has a protective service office, just like I'm talking to you about. They all sort of work in the same way. There can be subtle differences, but they all have protective service for older adults and for adults living with disabilities that you can call. So certainly, if you went on the internet and you looked under the National Adult Protective Service Association, you can click on any given state and they'll give you the number where you could call to report concerns or allegations of elder abuse in that state.
I think we have all the questions from the chat.
Okay.
No
Jay,
hands
do
here.
you have anything?
No, just great admiration for Denise.
Thank you, Jay. Well, I just want to say I have great admiration back for all of the Ombudsman program and all of you who have loved ones who are in facilities, and that you're advocating on behalf of those people. Again, we could not do our jobs without all of you. Many of you and many family members, friends, neighbors have made reports to us and really helped us in terms of knowing what's going on in facilities. So we very much appreciate that, all of your advocacy efforts in terms of trying to make sure that they're getting the best care and services in facilities possible, and that they're getting really what they deserve, which is, of course, good care and services. So I really appreciate all of you being on this call and, just taking the time to learn a little bit more about protective services. And again, if we can do anything for you, or even if you have a question, should this be reported? What should I do? Please don't hesitate to reach out to your local area agency on aging. The other thing I would just end with saying is that many of your counties have elder abuse task forces. So I hope that all of you in your local community would reach out to your local area agency on aging and support the elder abuse task force, where it's an interdisciplinary team who work together around the issue of elder abuse. So I hope that you all reach out, support that effort, or if your county happens to be a county who does not have one, that you would support the Area Agency on Aging Protective Service Unit in starting one in your local community. It really just takes a few people to get it started and to talk about what we can do in terms of making sure the community and all the professionals who work with older adults are on the same page and understand what elder abuse is and how, as a community, we can stop this from really having a negative impact on older adults. So I hope that all of you will take a minute to find out if your area agency on aging has an elder abuse task force, and if so, how you can best support that effort.
Thank you so much, Denise. I wasn't even aware of the task force, so that's news to me as well.
Well, we would
Fantastic.
certainly love to have all of you join task forces and to really support them and get them, really operating well. So I hope you'll take me up on that offer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And we will send some information out to everybody as a follow-up tomorrow, including the contact information. All right. So just to end our meeting on our upcoming meeting topics. So this is what we have coming up. On June 29th, we're going to have two speakers. They're going to talk about what COVID exposed and where do we go from here. So we're going to have Dr. Alice Bonner and Dr. Terry Fulmer. They're on the national scale, talking about changes for long-term care facilities and what we need to do from here. And then, believe it or not, we're already into July. We're going to hear from Richard Malott. He is the Director of Long-Term Care Community Coalition. He's going to talk about assessments and care planning. And if anybody wants to submit questions for the next presentation for Dr. Bonner and Dr. Fulmer, please check out a post is going to be up on the Facebook page here directly. You can add it to the Facebook page, or you can email Jay at ltc-ombudsman@pa.gov if you have any questions in advance for our doctors. They will be joining us next time. And as always, thank you so much for attending the Virtual Family Council. If you have any specific concerns or complaints, please contact the State Ombudsman Office. You can give us a call, 717-783-8975, or give us an email at ltc-ombudsman@pa.gov. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Denise, again.
Thank you.
Fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone.